honored to be here with Rita Baragona and, oh gosh,
Naomi Nemtzow.
the last name, I know,
Yes.
Naomi Nemtzow.
Yeah.
And I spent a considerable amount of time with this work, and I love it. And so that's lucky, because I said yes before I saw the work. Anyway. Okay, so thank you for coming, and the reward is all yours, as you'll get to sit down for a while over time in the presence of these two artists' deeply formal, mature works. Rita's work honors time and observation, slowing down from the outside in, the wenness to the awareness, the activity of sustained looking. Her recent studies go past realistic representation to a study of movements and rhythm and vibration and repetition in nature, which now include the creative leap for a perceptual painter honoring memory as well. In my trip to the Met right after our conversation, I was unexpectedly struck with the connection between a late Monet water lily and Rita's work. Naomi's leap is wider than Rita's. A well-trained perceptual painter who took perception to collage, that interesting medium of juxtaposition, using bold blocks of color and place and symbol to create image. Now using thought, experience, assemblage, doodle, playfulness, barcodes, pixels, hybrid creations, maps, the grid, to make a unified, non-hierarchical image. The rules seem more parallel to today's experience in the universe. When I took the subway home after our 3-hour extended art talk, I was looking at the subway map and kind of surprised to vibrate mark makings that were consistent with those in Naomi's new works. So I have some questions, and these three shorties, these three questions are all mine, and we didn't really, and these, no long answers, okay? So I'm going to just read all three, and then you guys are on. What was the first sign in your early childhood, the origin of this thing that connected you to art? The second one, what book are you reading now? The third one, what music are you listening to? And what artists are you looking at or thinking about right now? Take it away.
Yeah, sure. Well, why don't I do one part and then you do the next? Okay. What in my childhood?
Yeah, that was the first sign that you were going to turn out to be this.
Well, I decided to choose to be an artist when I was 17 because I felt it encompassed more than just learning and science. I was going to be a scientist. I was going to be a geologist. And I felt that it encompassed feeling and an understanding, a deeper understanding of nature.
Okay. You want to do these two, the book or the music or the artist?
The book that I'm reading right now, and I've been reading actually for several years with other books in between, is called A Beautiful Question by the physicist, who's a Nobel Prize physicist, Rolchek, I don't remember his first name. And I find a lot of correlations between what he says about quantum physics and science, and particularly about color, and what I'm doing.
Okay.
What music? Bach.
Okay. No problem.
What artists are you looking at right now? Well, continuously I look at, my three top are Cézanne, Matisse, and Bonnard. But I also look at Monet a lot. And lately I've been looking a lot at Lois Dodd and Ruth Miller.
Okay. All right, you're on.
Okay. Oh, and Giacometti. Sorry.
Okay, in my very early childhood, in kindergarten, when I was a shy kindergartner, when we had the opportunity to do whatever we wanted, I would sit down where the crayons and paper were, and I never tried to depict anything. There was no narration, no figuration. I just put patches of color next to each other. And I found, for some reason, at 5, putting patches next to each other, patches of different colors, was very interesting to me. And I would be asked, what is it? Because everyone wanted to know that it was a cow or my mother or whatever. Sorry. My brother or whatever. But I didn't have a word for what it was, and some grown-up gave me the word design. So from then on, I knew to say, I'm making a design. What's that? But I didn't decide to be an artist. That came much, much later. Much later. I happened to be in the middle of reading a wonderful memoir by my very old friend Kermit Fraser, who's a playwright, and it's called First Acts. And Kermit did a reading the other night, and then I started reading the book myself. So I'm enjoying that. I've been listening to African kora music, instrumental music, the last few years, and that's great music for me in the studio. Sometimes I get tired of it and I listen to something else. I've been listening to Django Reinhardt is my other go-to. And who am I looking at? I mean, certainly the people Rita mentioned. Ruth Miller's always an inspiration. I would say I go back to Montreal.
Makes sense. Okay, well that was for me. Now to get to the gold, out of the mouths of the artists themselves, a glimpse through a few questions. And all comments are welcome and questions. Going on the if not now when, which is Hillel, a Jewish philosopher from the Babylonian times. Naomi, can you tell us something about this new body of work, how this new body of work came into being? Can you point out the earliest work, the last work, and tell us something about that journey? Can you tell us how you start the work?
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with that last question because I start the work the same way I put those patches of color together as a 5-year-old. I have tons of painted paper in my studio that I painted with acrylic over the years, sheets. And I start by looking for 4 or 5 colors to make a basic palette. And the colors have to make light when they're put together, and they have to feel like they're unexpected to me. Or that something about the combination feels unexpected. And then I start moving patches of color, cutting out shapes and moving them around on the surface. So that's how the process starts. It's only after I've gotten to a point where I find the composition interesting that I then draw over that and sometimes come back and collage back into it. But the composition of shapes is the first part. How this started was in 2020, at the beginning of the age that we now know, when we were all quarantined, and for the early weeks I barely left my house. And I've told people this, I was on a Zoom call that wasn't 100% fascinating, not about art, and I started playing with scraps of paper while I was listening to the Zoom, which was about healthcare. And it was fun. And I did a couple of things, and then I had one of those fat graphite sticks that doesn't have wood around it. It's like a pencil with no wood. And then I started making marks with that. And I was having fun. Up till then, 50 years of painting, I would not have used the word fun. And so if I'm not going to have fun in the studio now, then when?
Yeah.
These are 2 of the earliest of this body of work from 2020. And I have other earlier ones in the rack back here, so you can come look after the talk. The latest ones are along this back wall and on the inside of this wall.
Okay. Should we go to Rita?
Yeah.
among your rich works, they don't know these questions, so we did talk about all these things, but if they stop for 5 seconds, Rita, among your rich works, there are works that go beyond what we consider solely perceptual. Hoffman is quoted as saying, "It is the rhythm that creates the spirit of the work, and that the highest quality in a painting is always the rhythm." You mentioned to me that time is a very important element in your work. Can you talk about your diptychs and connect the dots between time and rhythm?
Okay. Can I use my cheat sheet?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so the diptychs, most of them are on the other side of the wall.
But
This is a diptych. And in relationship to time, I'm just going to start literally. I painted these two sections separately at different times, maybe over the course of about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And then I painted this one. This one worked, and so it stayed by itself because it became the culmination of those that I had worked on. I work in series over time. By chance, these happened to be near each other in my studio wall, and I said, oh, they look better together than they did apart. So I put them together, and over the course of about a year and a half, I worked on them over time, putting marks in to find the rhythmic balances. Often the marks were not so much big masses of color, but more like linear rhythms that would enhance and allow this to flow in a wave linear fashion. So this one is called Vivaldi 2, Vivaldi Summer 2, leading to music, by the way, the fact that the music of Vivaldi, if everybody knows the Four Seasons, it's doing this. It's very organic in its shapes. Okay. What else? I'm supposed to do it in terms of time? So it's really important for me that rhythm in my paintings now are described by these little marks. I'm moving my eye from place to place to place to place, which is how you actually see, but I'm concentrating on that. And I mark it down in a kind of rhythmic dance on the picture plane to make a sense of space and time. So for me, the little marks are a lot like the notes in music, sort of making them. Okay?
Yeah, that's good. Okay, Naomi. Buried somehow in your thoughts, conscious or unconscious, your work demonstrates the freedom to cross-pollinate. Have you always doodled? Could we go further in your thinking? Is there a new personal philosophy that you could articulate?
Well, the first one I can definitely answer. Yes, I've always doodled. I went through school doodling when I should have been taking notes, or doodling among the notes, or, the written word notes. So yes, I've always doodled. I never thought of it as being part of my art practice. So that's kind of emerged fairly recently. It's something that actually Steffi Franks and I have talked about. As for philosophy, is that what you're?
Mm-hmm. Like a new personal
philosophy. I guess I can say this, that for most of my adult life as a painter, I've known what I was aiming for. I was influenced by these wonderful teachers. I had a formalist training by excellent painters. And so I heard their voices. No Blame, who I forgot to tell you about, was another very early formative influence when I was 19 or 20. And I've been hearing their voices, of course, my whole life, and aiming for wanting to do my version of what I had learned. And what's happened with this work, which did not start out to be serious work, it started out to be a distraction from a boring Zoom thing. I don't want to to say those voices aren't there, but they are very much further in the background. And so what I've internalized from all my wonderful teachers is with me, but the more outward voices telling me how to paint have gone away.
I think,
Now, here you go, good.
I lost it a little bit. What I see, shoot, it went out of my head, that you're working from the inside out. That as we grow older, inside out seeing becomes way more important than outside in seeing. And I see you making a transition to a kind of intelligence that fits being an older, more mature painter.
Well, that's good.
There's a philosophy.
That's Rita, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, Monica has something.
I just, because I know Naomi for a long time, I think in this work also is that her wit and her sense of humor has emerged out of her, in her work.
Well, she's having fun.
Yeah, but I mean, there is something about your personality that is definitely coming out to the fore.
Thank you, Monica, because I never, I mean, that's a part of who I am as a person, and those of you who know me know that, but I never saw that as being connected to my art making. So yes, now there's a place for it.
Can I say something to that, actually, a little bit about mine? So I have always loved working from nature because I am totally present and joyful when I'm painting from nature. It's not fun exactly, but it's total joy, it's total immersion in a kind of impermanence as I make things, that's why the name, over time or through time. So in a way, we're paralleling each other, I think, in the love of doing this.
Yeah, I see your works very formally too. I mean, I don't think you've left anything behind. They have play and they have humor, and
I don't feel like I've rejected it.
you have, it's
Also,
all
that
there.
it's less like in my years.
Right, but they're so strong formally. I do have a question. I forgot to bring a pencil or something. You said light, and so I'm wondering what you mean by light in your works, because I was thinking that your relationship to light, oh, it's a pencil, it's changed. This is not the light of day.
No.
And could you talk about that? You used the word, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Okay, when I was, those of you who knew my work over, earlier years, I did many subjects, but the one I probably did the most and was most known for was urban landscape. And I pretty regularly started an urban landscape painting by finding a relationship between the color of the road and the color of the sky. So it'd be a blue and a gray, or two grays or two blues. And that was the first color relationship I would establish. And what I learned from Nell Blaine and from Leland Bell was that when you find when you can tune what matters about color is the relationships between colors, right? It's never about one color, and it's not about local color, but it's about the way the colors relate to each other. And I felt that when painting from observation, that when the color relationships were adjusted correctly, then the painting had a feeling of natural light to it. Here I'm not dealing with natural light, but when I'm shopping in my collection of painted paper for colors, I still want a parallel kind of vibration between the colors.
Yeah, okay, I was,
Is that?
yeah, that satisfies me.
Okay.
You use the word light, that's just what,
Yeah.
I think that these are conceptual colors in a way, not based in the light that we experience.
They're not based in observation.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, I agree.
Yeah, but the interesting thing, because I paint with white, my whole goal, well, one of my goals is very much to bring an inner light into the whole picture. So the light that I feel inside is exuding out from the way I put the colors together. Is it observational light? Yes, because I'm looking at nature and I'm observing what I choose to observe in nature, even on a cloudy day. And I've actually been working a little bit more with darks. But it's also about getting at a kind of interior light. That especially when I'm working now from memory of what the light was. But light is so essential to me, and it's interesting, Naomi talked about how she started out with the sky color. For a long time, I've been doing that with the oceans. I started out with horizon and put the color of the sky a little bit in the top part, and then work my eyes down and back, down and back, down and back, getting the rhythm of the flow of the ocean, hearing it, seeing it, and then gesturing it down. But I did the same thing to kind of get a unity at first. I'm not doing that anymore. Now the sky is part of it.
Yeah, well, the diptych that's,
Should I go get it?
yeah, well, the diptych that's behind the wall here, which is a seascape, I remember Mercedes saying, that the picture plane is about consciousness, and that when you come to the plane, you're actually at this higher level, if you're answering the plane. And so this one of Rita's diptych, she lost the horizon, and the whole dialogue is with the plane and with the space that's in front of her and the light and the experience of the ocean. But I want to just talk a little, I want you to talk about it too, but I just want to say that there's two different ways that you're approaching color and light. One is very much inspired by Matisse, and then the sea paintings, it seems like the drawing and maybe a family of color, the family of blue, green, and white of the page. Can you talk about the difference in those two things? That why a swatch of, is it the flowers? What is it that makes you have one?
Okay, I have to think a little bit about whether, I don't know if I see a difference. I'm responding directly to what I'm looking at. I become one of it. It goes through me, I go through it. We're just having a dance together, a kind of perceptual dance. So I had never thought about it. I guess the color in like the still lives and the flowers is coming very much from a Matisseian idea of a chromatic color and the flow of light in the spectrum. And can I make with pigment color the colors in the spectrum? So I am moving, instead of making a gray, although I've added grays now, the gray, the dark of a green can go all the way to blue. It can even go to purple, but that's beside the point. But it can definitely go all the way to the blue, and the light of green can go all the way to yellow. So these green trees back here are actually, in my mind, yellow. It looks more vibrant, the vibrations of the resonance of the color is more perceptually real to me than if I used real color. But I'd say the same thing of the ocean. I'm not making up color. Those are the colors I felt see. Particularly this one, the light changed radically. There was a cloudy day, get really sunny, get really cloudy. I allowed this place to be sunny, that place to be dark, so that it was an accumulation of time through color.
I wouldn't mind interjecting at this point.
Good.
First of all, I came here with a question of asking you about your range of yellow. So what you just said about your range of yellow can become green and blue, and even purple, is very interesting to me. But the other thing is that with this and the one on the bottom here and the diptych, both of them remind me of Van Gogh's calligraphic drawings.
Yeah. Well, I look at those. And the calligraphic drawings of the Japanese and Chinese people, too.
Yes.
I'm very attached to Van Gogh because of his, this goes a little off your subject. I love his calligraphy because it energizes the white spaces between the rhythmic lines. And I think that it gets closer to what nature actually looks like than a kind of geometric grid-like construction. I love Mondrian's flowers. Particularly, there's one blue one which is very chrysanthemum. It's very calligraphic. Yeah. Again, because I feel that impermanence and change and all the things that nature is more organic, more fluid than a grid-like construction. So let's see, am I answering the question?
Well,
So why Van Gogh? He was the first person I looked at when I started doing these oceans. I started doing the oceans because I was reading about chaos theory and change, and I wanted to see, well, how can I draw that? What can I draw in it? And the ocean's the perfect thing because it's constantly changing, changes fast. You can't get back to where it was if you're looking for form. It's not there. So I started looking at Van Gogh, so yes, there is a correlation.
What about the Da Vinci drawings? Is that
Very, Da Vinci, he was on my top. If we went one more artist that we did. I love those, and especially because they fit chaos theory absolutely perfectly. They're about a spiral.
That's what, when you said that my mind went to.
Yeah.
Well, I think this would be a good time to just say something about the meditation flowers.
Oh, yeah.
Because this has everything to do with what we're talking about. And these are the sepia chalk, or sepia...
Oh, there's one, we can't take those.
No, I'm going to do this one.
Okay.
Well, can I say something else?
Yeah, sure.
When she said the word meditation, I've been listening all to your talk about the way Buddhists talk about impermanence and flow and from within. You know, everything you've said so far sounds very
Well, it is. It's very much like that. And I think what I love about art that's happening now is a kind of integrating of my science ideas, because I love to read about science. I'm into neurobiology right now, but also still physics. But that interrelatedness of Buddhism and spiritual ideas and art and science and music, all to me are starting to go together. They're becoming one big idea.
What happens when you get old?
I know. Well, this is kind of cool, but I'm going off the subject. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I read very briefly about some scientists that are studying old age intelligence. And it's called crystallized intelligence.
Wait, did you say old age intelligence?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, use longevity. That's the word you're supposed to use. That's the politically correct word.
But I was not being politically correct.
I'm not either. I'm fine with being old. So crystallized intelligence is that kind of intelligence that puts together an experience you have at 5 with an experience you're having now and making sense of it,
Right.
which is what crystallized intelligence is. And I feel that that's happening in my art. I feel it's happening in Naomi's, going in slightly different directions. what we're doing.
Can I just point out that your clothing reflects that? That would be, and Naomi, you have a block of color, and your scarf are all different patterns by your earrings.
I think it takes a lot of guts for Naomi to, that you started something completely different that you never had done before. And in maybe less than 2 years, you came up with a whole show like this. I mean, the work is really strong. I think it's really great.
But now back to going deeper, what happens in these 3 hours that you spend on these? Can you just, because the other day you articulated it, it was beautiful.
Okay, so my response to COVID was to start doing these drawings. I've been drawing flowers for a long, obviously I'm involved with flowers. So I would sit with the same flower several days in a row at 3 hours a shot, generally speaking. I wouldn't get up. I would kind of meditate. I'd kind of breathe. I would watch. I'd look very, very carefully at the slow motion changes that happened in the flower. The petals are very much alive and they shift. We don't see it because we're not spending enough time looking slow enough. Their life idea is a little slower than ours. I felt like it was a meditation. I felt totally and completely one with what was happening. One like this is as an older peony, and so I probably drew it a couple of days before too. I got to know the petals, and as they start to droop, the inside, and I think this is very metaphoric of old age, or longevity, yes, it is, much better word, that starts to get bigger. That starts to expand as the beauty of this flower that's, dancing all over the place starts to deteriorate. And sometimes the little tiny petals grow they're really little, they don't get to grow very big, start to grow and get bigger, expanding that center that's ultimately, if it were in a peony, would ultimately be the seed that makes for the future.
Wow, that's cool. So I have just one more Naomi question, and then a comment or two, things I love about certain paintings. Are you, I've just been sort of dabbling, trying to understand surrealism. Now, I don't understand surrealism, but Martika understands surrealism, so I want to understand anything Martika's involved with. Is there anything about surrealism that touches on your practice?
It's a very interesting question, because I have not especially looked at the surrealists over all these decades of looking at art. And yet, a couple of people have made that kind of observation that they're seeing a connection. So I think, in some sense, part of this is maybe drifting in a bit of a surrealist fashion, even though I want to say nothing about this whole body of work has been something I sat down and decided. Nor have I given words to any of it until I started putting this show up. And when Rita and I talked about, should we give a talk, I said, well, I have nothing to say. But it's because the process was so nonverbal for me. I'm a very verbal person, and this is the closest I've come. So I've kind of left judgment behind. Maybe that's what I meant by not hearing the voices so loud. I've left judgment behind, and I think I've managed to leave verbal language behind in my process, which feels very good to me. And I think that maybe becomes surrealist in a sense.
Yeah, I don't know what
Martika would know, I don't, but yeah.
But for me, though, Naomi, and I don't know surrealism either, so I may be saying something that isn't right, but I see it coming out of your unconscious. And I see it coming out of Naomi's unconscious, that's everybody's unconscious, the kind of Jungian, getting at something Jungian that's in all of us. But totally
But
unconscious.
that's exactly the definition of surrealism.
Is that, okay, I wasn't sure.
Bringing it out from unconscious and dream imagery, gathering dream imagery, that kind of thing.
So one thing that's happened in this process is I make marks and things start to suggest things. And there'll be suggestions of some potential narrative content. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and I go with it. And sometimes I just let it be a small thing. But what's been enormous fun for me, as people have started to see this work, is what imagery people see.
Right.
And somebody, one friend of mine who knows my work was like, it's about baseball. Do I know from baseball? You know, but that those suggestions that come from wherever they come from mean different things to different people.
Right, which is fun. And can also mean universally the same, without it being a subject, a narrative, the same kinds of things, the same kinds of shapes that depict a certain emotion.
So I don't know if that's an answer to surrealism.
Yeah.
Well, it is if she says that's a definition.
Okay.
That's the definition in the
Well,
book I use.
I'll take Jackie's word.
Now, well, I just want to say that if that's not about Guernica, and that's not a blimp, and that's not a subway map, and an aerial photograph of Pebble.
They do have map-like qualities, don't they?
They're
They
mappings,
do, yeah.
but they're in brainy mappings and playful mappings and non-hierarchical.
Exactly. They keep reminding me of Native Australian, I'm trying to think of
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah, so to me, it's like walking about.
Exactly.
You're walking,
Exactly.
you're
I
walking
do
about from
sometimes
place to place.
feel that I have found my inner indigenous person.
Uh-huh.
Now, that's hilarious because I'm Jewish and the Jews have been wandering for 6,000 years.
Well, so you're still wondering.
So I'm still wandering, but I do feel that I've connected with indigenous art.
Well, there's a book you have to read, Song Lines.
Okay.
And it's funny because these remind me of Charlie Chaplin in modern times.
Oh, I'll take that.
I think of your work, this body of work, as being particularly animated.
There is we're talking about river and the flow of this conversation. There is a river going. Sarah Z. and Jessica Stockholder and Diana Cooper and Heidi Whitman. There are people that you're swimming in the stream that is about experience, but not necessarily perceptual experience. And I'm just very excited about what's going to happen and where you're going with this, because that's so solid and convincing. It's not tentative work at all. It's really great.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
I have the same word in my mind, machinery. And as soon as you talk about surrealism, my mind immediately went to the assemblages, which they seem to me to be some kind of machinery that has some kind of like arcane psychological function.
Who's the guy who did those drawings? I'm sorry, I'm blanking. But someone who did these fabulous machines that,
Rube Goldberg?
Rube Goldberg, yeah. So they, maybe that kind of machine or.
But
Yeah, maybe.
I think he means more psychological, right?
I don't think that we're in control of these things. Maybe we can sort of live reasonably in spite of them, but they continue to sort of operate on some level in us.
The earliest and the latest work that you showed us were two-dimensional and they were contained within the rectangle.
Yes.
But you didn't speak about the shaped work or the work over here that you actually brought into 3 dimensions.
Right.
Can you speak about that
Yeah.
and their relationship?
So another thing that was happening over these last few years, over some time I had been having this kind of feeling percolating that I wanted to do something 3-dimensionally. And I didn't follow that feeling for quite a long time that it was building in me. And a few summers ago, before COVID, I went to visit Bob Brasic in his studio in Connecticut, and we were just, kind of chatting about the work that Bob was doing, and what if this and what if that. And Bob, I left that visit feeling like, I have to listen to this voice that wants me to do something three-dimensional. And so some of you know Lee Tribe, who's a sculptor. I went back to the studio school for a Monday night class with Lee, and first was working in the round, and then started doing these wall pieces. And Lee was all over my case about leaving what's with the rectangle? You painters and your rectangles, kind of thing. I mean, he didn't say it like that because he's a very kind man, but I was like,
That's what you heard.
I heard it, and yet I really struggled. What do you mean? It was, the rectangle was what I'd done all my life. But I started letting some of the elements protrude from the rectangle, and I knew that I was only kind of scratching the surface of that. But it was from that then that I started doing the 2D shaped pieces. And then I thought, oh, gee, why am I doing 2D shaped pieces, but the 3D thing, anyway, that's just kind of where I am in the process. I think going forward, I have to integrate the 3D and the shape and the...
Which of the latest of the, you said that the latest work you did was this work?
Of the 2Ds, the latest are on that wall, but these are quite recent. Stephanie's got a question.
So, I'm sorry, it's my fault that Lee has been haranguing you about... No, wait, because when I look at his... I'm kidding. When I look at his drawings, I say, but the rectangle, Lee, you have to be more concerned with the rectangle. But,
he's not here, so we can say whatever we want.
And Lee, by the way, apologized profusely. He could not be here today. But I wanted to say that as I am looking, it's great to have more time to look at your work. And the more I look at it, the more I do really see the animation qualities, both of the whole pieces, like that one in the front, on that, I don't know if everyone can see it, but the red and blue and gray piece. To me, it's, I don't know, it reminds me of like the Roadrunner or something, it's just like, it's so animated. But and then you have these smaller animation incidents going on like inside the pieces too. So what I'm discovering as I sit here and look is how much, before I was seeing sort of like animated animals and things within the piece, but now I'm seeing the whole pieces as like, an animal sort of moving, energetically through space or something.
I just want to say, process-wise, that one and these, they started out as rectangles, and the shaping was cutting away.
Yes, right. And I also want to say that, Rita, I love, I am so in love with your work too, as you know. And when I walked in here the other day, I've said this to the two of them, I felt like I was being bathed in luminosity, by both of your works.
Naomi, what did these works have to do with St. Francis and ecstasy? No, but I'm serious, because that the series you did, based on the painting at the Frick, really were breakthrough, works for you, I think, and I could easily see as a transition those collages and other works that you did from the Bellini's St. Francis, and they are ecstatic.
That's a great idea.
That's interesting. So when I first started working from the Bellini, similarly to a series I had done from Broigle previous to that, I have to tell you, Gail, you'll be disappointed in me, but you're going to have to bear with me for a minute. I come to them absolutely with my formalist head.
Oh, no,
How,
which head?
my formalist training. I mean, the Bellini had kind of been in my mind for many years, so I think that speaks to many of its qualities. But when I started working from it, I'm working from my formalist training. How does he do this? How does that fit? How do those shapes, how does he make the light? What are the color relationships? You know, that's where I'm coming from with it. In the formalist training that I got at the New York Studio School, it was almost, maybe forbidden is too strong a word, but it wasn't done to talk about emotion or narrative. No, nobody was talking about that. Everyone was talking in formalist terms. And yet, there was something a little bit less than honest about that. There was a part of experience and a part of art making that was just not part of the conversation. There were no critical voices. So maybe ecstasy is the cessation of critical voices.
Can I talk about ecstasy?
Yeah.
When you use that word, I think when I'm truly, totally painting, I'm in a state of, I called it meditation, I'm in a state where essences become totally one. And it's a kind of ecstasy, it's a kind of ecstatic time. This kind of painting, I lose all sense of time. Time disappears, it comes out at the end. And I feel that's a kind of form of ecstasy.
The question, Rita, I'm finally kind of getting this idea of time in your work as you're talking about it, so I appreciate that.
Time becomes space, by the way.
Yeah, time, space, the whole of everything. But what I was curious about was that when you talked about looking at the ocean, right, it's always changing minute to minute, you can never capture it, right? So that happens very fast.
Yes.
Whereas the flower, the one you describe it, you say is very slow.
Right.
So what's that process? Are you drawn to those differences, or what's that? Okay.
Very much
So
I like the idea of, I started painting, well, let me start again. It wasn't so much I started. What I see in nature is that there's constant flux. The light changes, everything changes all the time, but we in our minds want to try to create some kind of permanence. I don't think that exists. So I paint things that change over time, whether it's slow time, like a flower, but a flower only lives for about 3 days, particularly dahlias and peonies. They die real fast. And they can't handle water that well. You know, they can't handle rain very well. But they're solid. They're strong. So the time difference in the oceans, moving very quickly, and my eye jumping from place to place to place to place. And it's exciting.
Like Vivaldi.
yeah.
Like Vivaldi. Very much like Vivaldi and Bach. Bach is so good. And also medieval music. The flowers are more like medieval music. Long, thin, crazy juxtapositions of spatial notes.
Interesting.
So yeah, no, I am drawn to the idea that,
It's awesome.
and especially when I started doing this and started seeing the individual flower. Can I say one other thing? So what happened, which I didn't expect? So I've been thinking about change and energy and matter and all that kind of stuff for a lifetime. And I thought that if I really got close to the energy and matter, I would go abstract. that it would become just shapes and lines and rhythms, kind of maybe like somebody like, I don't know, like Andrew Forge or something, where the subject disappeared. So I'm doing these flowers, and they're getting more and more realistic. They're very Da Vinci-like in a way. And there came a certain point, and I don't know whether it shows through in the picture, where I went past the realism of them into another zone that was very much about energizing the paper, but not abstract. Very much about making aliveness without making abstraction. And I thought, oh, it's not that I'm stupid that I don't get there. I don't have to get there. It can be in that. And I let go of that idea. I don't have to go abstract to get at the abstract essences of things.
Exactly. Can I ask Naomi something? You know, I always go to process. I'm so interested in how people make things and everything. When you were describing the way you make these, I think all of your work, really, you were saying you put like down a foundational block of color, right? You're kind of like really just setting a very formal stage for what you're going to be doing. And then you come to the embellishment of the work, and it seems to me very almost symbolic, like symbols. I don't know so what's the switch in the process? What are you going through? Like, are you trying to say more? And I mean, they certainly become much more animated, I think, when you're adding those embellishments. What's happening during that process for you?
One, that's a good question that I don't have a ready answer for. But two, so kind of the way I worked when I was painting, say, the urban landscape, I was always seeing big shapes. I was seeing that kind of planar, synthetic way of seeing shapes. And then I was never someone who could draw with a paintbrush. I could delineate large areas with a paintbrush. And then I would go into it and draw with either a pencil or a palette knife.
Okay.
So there was this juxtaposition of linear against masses of color. That, I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
And it's not that I had anything against being able to draw with a paintbrush, it just never came to me that way. So that part feels like a constant.
I just have a question as an audience member. I feel like, all works have to come to some place of unity, where you know everything about it is unified. And I'm finding two different paths of your unity.
So I'm intrigued by the distances between things. And things aren't things, they're colors. And in the color versus the oceans, that's more about rhythmic change. And the still lives and even these flowers are very much about the distances between the colors as rhythmic vibrations, we use the word, sort of resonant rhythmic vibrations. And I've been interested in that for a really long time. I love color. Color's my first love, and my last love, and my continuing love. Now, what about rhythm? That's newer. The rhythm comes in because I started seeing the spaces between colors.
I am struck by both of you breaking out of all the kind of formal ideas about a rectangle or some kind of containment. I see the same thing in Naomi. Why choose 3 to 5 colors before you start? Why not just anything? The newspaper, anything that you have around you, what a candy bar you just ate. Why not just make it an unlimited thing and take what you need as you need it?
What I'm hearing from you, Martha, is so we start out with some limits because that's how we give ourselves a structure, and we need some kind of structure to do anything. But I think you're encouraging both of us to question where that tendency towards structure is holding us back, as well as it enables and it holds back at the same
Yes.
time. And I think you want us to question that.
I mean, I think it's tremendously
Exactly.
exciting to hear both of you talk about your work, but that just strikes me. I didn't even know where I was going with my thoughts, but it just becomes clearer and clearer that that's exactly what I'm trying to say. You have those limitations. You have reached an age where you've had enough experience with what you're doing. You know what those limits are. You know it will, your mind and body will tell you what they are. You don't need to set them up in advance.
Martha's good. What I'm hearing from Martha is, you're going for something here, so go for it.
So go for it, because
Am I-
if not now, when?
I have some icing on the cake, and if there's a real great question, we're gonna accept it. So I talked to Ruth Miller this morning, and I told her what I was doing, and so then she just flowed with this. I remember Naomi's early work. She really lit out. These new works seem to be talking to one another. They seem to open doors for her. I find them optimistic. They open up a lot of questions, really addressing questions, a new dialogue that's exciting. Rita's work has stayed on course. The works are richer and more sure. The abstraction and the observation is becoming joined. They're beautiful.
I just want to thank all of you for turning out.
Yeah,
And
it's great.
you are the audience that I think Rita and I feel like you're the people we came for.
Yeah, I felt very comfortable. This is wonderful.
And we're happy to hang out and chat some more. But we'll let
Here's for you.